What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show. I'm Kevin Smith. I am here today for a Q&A episode. I am getting this episode shot before I head to a little weekend getaway with my wife. This is my birthday weekend, and although I usually have no interest in planning things out and doing fun stuff for my birthday, I usually just do whatever my wife thinks will be fun, which I'm totally fine with. She's really, really into birthdays, which is great. But usually we just, maybe get some dinner and I get treated nicely on my birthday. But because I am pretty much obsessed with golf right now, I am super pumped for this weekend, not because it's my birthday, but because we are going to Virginia as well as West Virginia for a golf trip. And I'm also pumped that my wife is starting to catch the golf bug as well. She's gotten some lessons. She's gotten way, way better. And she's actually going to play. I'm playing 4 rounds, one on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And she's actually playing 3 out of those 4 rounds with me. So we are going to go to the Greenbrier on Friday. Going to play at one of their courses in the afternoon, the Meadows course, which is a really, really, really nice course, but it's not even their best course. The best course is Old White, which I am going to play solo on Saturday morning. And then thereafter, we are going to drive about 45, 50 minutes, not very far. The Greenbrier, by the way, is in West Virginia. Then we're going to drive to Virginia after that morning round on Saturday to the Omni Homestead Resort. And they have 2 courses as well. So we're both going to play on Sunday morning as well as Monday morning. And then we're going to get there and check in early on Saturday and probably find some stuff to do. They have a bunch of activities that you can kind of choose from. And they give you, when you stay there, they give you credits for multiple different activities. So it should be an awesome time, and I'm super pumped for it. And we're leaving in a couple days. So getting this episode shot because there will not be a lot of podcast recording opportunities while I'm there. But anyway, if anyone's played either of those courses or been in that area or know that area, drop a comment below and let me know what to expect and how awesome it's going to be, because it really looks like it's going to be a great time. So 4 rounds, 4 days, lots of fun. And if you're into golf, of course. But yeah, got that to look forward to. But today we are going to do some Q&A questions from my Instagram Q&A. If you want your question answered in the future, that's the best way to ask it, is to follow me on Instagram, Terminator_training. Every other week, give or take, I do a Q&A, ask me anything, and you can ask your question if it's a good question, or if I deem it's a good question, or candidly, if I just happen to see your question, because I get a bunch of them, and it's not terrible, then I'll answer it either on Instagram in my stories, kind of briefly, or more in depth here on the show, or both. If it's a really good question, I'll do both. Or if it's a question that I just saw, both times, I do both. Honestly, all I do is just go through the actual questions on my phone, and I don't just ask them in order. I don't answer every single one. I usually just pick out the ones that are either more nuanced or that would apply to more people, or a question, which there will be some today, which I'm excited for, that I haven't answered, at least recently. But honestly, some of the questions in here, I don't think I've answered at all before or discussed before. So we'll get into some of those. And yeah, hopefully you guys can use this information to implement it into your lives and make yourself better, whatever your goals may be. So with that out of the way, let's hop into question number 1. And here is one of the ones that I was just kind of talking about, question I haven't answered before. If you could rewrite the Army fitness test, what would it be? Super cool question. I would say the closest thing that already exists to an Army fitness test that if I were in charge, I would write would be the upper body round robin, or UBRR, but I would make some tweaks to it. So the UBRR, for those not aware, usually, we used to do this somewhat decently often in the Q course as well as SOF. I don't think it's really much of a thing anymore. I don't think they do it in the Q course, but anyway, it is, and I could have a little bit of this order / the durations and things like that wrong, but the general structure is 1 minute max push-ups, regular push-ups, a max rep bench press with, I think it's 80 or 85% of your body weight. So if you weigh 100 pounds, you're using 80, 85 pounds. Obviously, most people listening to this probably don't weigh 100 pounds, but easy math. It is max chin-up reps. Actually, no, pull-up reps, dead hang, body weight only. And then it is max dip reps, body weight, regular dips. Then it is max reps of, I think they call them kip-ups. Basically, you're holding onto a pull-up bar with your hands kind of interlocking. So one hand's facing right, one hand's facing left. You're facing sideways, not like a standard pull-up. And you have to bring your feet up above the bar and touch them together. It's pretty much like a toes to bar, except you have to bring them up over the bar and touch your feet together. And also you're facing sideways rather than facing forward like a standard toes to bar. And it's max reps of that. And then you have to do a rope climb with a 30-pound vest. I want to say it's just one. You just do one rope climb, no time limit. You just have to get a certain height and come back down. And you have to do a shuttle run. I can't remember exactly what it looks like, but it's a shuttle run that probably takes 15 to 25 seconds. I can't exactly remember, but it's just going back and forth. You grab blocks, you put them down, you grab the next block, put it down, and so on and so forth. And then you go into a 5-mile run. So obviously that's mostly upper body minus the shuttle run and the actual run. But I would probably keep something like the shuttle run. I would probably keep something like the run, whether it's a 5K run, a 10K run, a 5-mile run, whatever it is. I would definitely keep one of the two calisthenics, whether it's dips or push-ups, one of the two pushing calisthenics, whether it's dips or push-ups. And I'd probably keep the bench press as well. I don't think doing push-ups and dips and bench, I think that's a little bit too redundant, but keep those. I would keep the pull-ups. I might change it to maybe like a weighted chin-up, like max weighted chin-up, one rep max. And then I would probably throw in a couple of lower body lifts, like a hex bar deadlift and maybe a front squat or a squat of choice, maybe a safety bar squat. Honestly, a safety bar squat is way more appropriate for way more guys in the military than a barbell squat, even though that's not what you'll see. That's just the case. So it would be something a little bit more inclusive, like basically anyone can throw a safety bar in their back and do a squat. Not anyone can do a solid barbell back squat or front squat. So it'd be something like that. Or it would be some sort of single leg exercise or something similar. Something to test your general squatting strength as well as your general hinging strength. Although a hex bar deadlift is kind of a combination between a squat and a hinge. And then I might do something like a broad jump just to test explosiveness, jumping ability, or maybe a 60 to 80 yard dash just to test that like max speed. So I definitely jumped around there a lot, but essentially it would have a couple of pushing exercises, one calisthenic, one actual lifting, a pulling exercise, max weighted chin up. It would have a squatting exercise. It would have a hinging exercise. And it would have a jumping / explosive test, whether it's a broad jump or an 80-meter dash or 60-meter dash or both. And it would have the shuttle, so going back and forth, change of direction. It may not look exactly like the UBRR shuttle, but something similar. And then it would have a run, whether it's a 5-mile run or something like that. I think that's a pretty solid test. You could make an argument where rucking would be a good substitution for running, or maybe rucking could be added into it. And honestly, this test that I just kind of went through would take quite a while. It'd be like a full morning probably, depending on how many people are taking it. So it would be quite the endeavor, but I think it would be a little bit more appropriate and relevant for his overall soldier fitness capabilities than what's currently in the Army's repertoire. So that's probably what I would do. Next question. I know your opinion on this, but what ducks did you wear while you were in? So I went down, I've got a pond actually like right down my street, right through the woods behind my house pretty much. And there's a ton of ducks there. And it kind of gave me the ability to choose the better ducks. Because obviously if you're going to wear ducks and you're going to wear them throughout your military career, you want really, really high quality ducks with like really strong elite level quacking ability. So I recruited a couple of them and I wear them for most of my career. Just kidding. I think you meant rucks. So I have always been a fan of the Tactical Tailor Malice Pack. That is not the only good option, but it's the option that I went with. I bought this probably towards the end of the Q course, so over a decade ago, and it's still as good as new. It smells pretty bad because I've sweat a lot in it, but the Ruck has not degraded whatsoever. And it's a little bit more expensive than some Rucks. It's definitely no like mystery ranch, like really high level mystery ranch or anything like that, which I'll get into in a second. But it is pretty awesome. The Alice Pack is also great. It's definitely cheaper and it's a little bit less, I guess, robust and high speed, but it still gets the job done. If you go to group, you will likely get assigned multiple different size mystery ranch Rucks. You'll get like a smaller assault pack, you'll get maybe a mid-size one, and then you'll get like a huge one. I personally love those for like packing a bunch of stuff in them. If I was like going overseas or going to a trip where I needed a bunch of stuff, plus I needed a ruck, but I knew I wasn't going to be like doing a ton of rucking. Those were great. But for long rucks, I wasn't a huge fan. The frame is a little different than what you'll see on a Malice Pack or an Alice Pack. And if I'm going for like long rucks, or if I'm going for a ruck where I want to go fast and I want it to feel comfortable and not like tear up my back, like the skin on my back just from rubbing, then I would go with the Malice. But those are kind of the only rucks that I really have experience with. Some people are really into gear dose, and some people way too into gear, but someone like that would be probably a better person to ask about different options. But you can't really go wrong with Tactical Tailor Malice Pack. You can't go wrong with an Alice Pack. And if you want to wait and check out the mystery ranch, of course you could buy a mystery ranch, but most mystery ranch rucks are $700, $800, $900,000. So just keep that in mind. Tactical Tailor, I think when I bought it was like $375. It might be a little bit more expensive now, but again, it lasts forever and it's as good as new 11, 12 years later, and I've worn it a ton. So just some food for thought. Next question, US SOCOM began researching PEDs for operators. Potential disaster or the right direction? Okay, this one is going to be probably a future full episode once I actually see what's going on and educate myself on the situation. But I will kind of just share some thoughts right now. So it should not come as a shock to you that being in SOF, being in special operations, is very hormone unfriendly and longevity unfriendly. You don't sleep very well, not because you're deciding to, but because your job is kind of making it so that you don't sleep as much. You don't always have access to the best food. It's a high stress job. You're not always able to maintain consistent, good, sound quality training all the time. And also, you are, by the way, getting a bunch of TBIs all the time. You're eating charges. You are around lots of loud noises, and so on and so forth. Lots of things that kind of contribute to the job being hormone unfriendly or longevity unfriendly or health unfriendly. Now, you can, of course, combat it, but some guys just flat out have really low testosterone, and some guys would benefit greatly or do benefit greatly from being on testosterone. Now, the way the Army does it, however, is you have to have two, and we're just talking testosterone now. I'll talk like general PEDs here in a second, but the way the Army deems whether you are a testosterone replacement candidate is you have to have two consecutive tests, or no, I don't know if they have to be consecutive, but they have to be in a different month. So you have to have one test under 300, and then at least a month later, you have to have another test under 300. Now, although the normal range, quote unquote, for testosterone, depending on where you look, is going to be somewhere between 300 and 1,000-ish nanograms per deciliter, that's a massive range, first of all. And what the Army kind of does not even consider, they don't even take it into mind, is symptoms. Having symptoms of low T. For example, one guy may have 500 or 600 total testosterone and feel a bunch of unwanted, performance unfriendly symptoms of having low testosterone, but because his number is not too low, according to the Army, they're not even going to consider it. Whereas another dude may be at 250, which is low by the Army standards for sure, but he may have no symptoms whatsoever. and he may not even go and get his testosterone checked because you have to jump through hoops to get your testosterone checked by the Army too. It's a whole different subject. But he may not even go because he feels great. He performs well. No issues. But the dude with 500 to 600 who has all these symptoms is going to continue to feel terrible and perform terribly. And basically, it's not very good for your health to go through life having low testosterone or symptoms of low testosterone, even if your numbers are in the normal range. So he's not going to get any help at all from the Army. However, a lot of guys bypass this by going out of pocket and go into some off-base place who will gladly help them, because most high-quality either male hormone clinics or telehealth networks or endocrinologists take into account the person's symptoms, not just their numbers, but their symptoms, as well as free testosterone, which is another measure that is highly relevant for how much of the testosterone in your body you can actually use for your benefit. If you have really low free testosterone and really high testosterone, you still might not feel great. If you have really high free testosterone, but low overall testosterone, you still might feel pretty good. Not always, but you might. So all those things are factors, and the real places that actually are in the business of like helping guys optimize, not just live and not just get by, but like optimize, they are going to take all that into account and therefore either suggest lifestyle remedies, or because it's SOF and all the lifestyle remedies that work really well, improving your sleep, improving your nutrition, being less fat, lifting weights on a regular basis, not being super duper stressed, that's not always even practical when you're in SOF or when you're in certain Army or military units. So oftentimes it's a lot more practical to take exogenous testosterone replacement therapy, which is not the same as being super physiological, like having super high, like bodybuilder doses testosterone, where your testosterone's like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. It'll put you, most people, they try to get guys at 1,000-ish, give or take. And what happens? They feel better, they perform better, they do their job better, they're more reliable, they have better mental health, and they're more driven to actually go about what they need to go about, and they're able to recover a lot better, and a bunch of positive things where if you're taking exogenous testosterone and you're taking the right amount of it, it's generally going to improve your health, even if you're getting it from an exogenous source. So there's lots and lots of guys who have experienced that throughout their career. And so they go out of pocket, they circumvent the Army's stupid rules. In my opinion, they're really stupid and very, very short-sighted. And they just show how behind the Army is in medical and health and performance terms. And they go on it. So if they're including all these people in their PED research and they're going to test everyone for like testosterone replacement therapy, then honestly, I would say in SF at least, because that's what I have experience with, Army Special Forces, at least half, maybe 2/3 of dudes are going to pop hot for it because it's very, very common. Now, if we're talking other more intense stuff like trenbolone or D-ball or Winstrol or a bunch of mystery SARMs that guys will take as well, then that's kind of a different story. I do understand the argument for cracking down on that type of stuff because it can be very, very dangerous and it's not necessary. But if they don't make that distinction between TRT or hormone replacement therapy versus bodybuilder doses of things or higher doses of more dangerous and more risky PEDs, more mysterious PEDs that you get off like the gray market, then it's going to be a massive problem. So if they're beginning their research on it, I find that really funny that they're just starting to research this stuff in 2025, but again, I'm not super surprised. If they're just starting, it's going to take them a while to actually become educated enough and develop the right systems to actually test people and do it in a reasonable manner that doesn't knock out half the force. So again, I will definitely make a longer, more in-depth podcast or video on this because I think it's super important and super relevant. And it does require more of a deep dive and more research on my behalf and more looking into things. But that's my general view at first glance of the potential problems that it could cause. So I'm not sure if it's going to be a disaster or if it's going to be a good thing, but I also think that if someone is physiologically suppressed, physiologically incapable of doing their job at their best potential, then getting some assistance, especially it's a pretty damn important job being in SOF, maybe not right this second, but in general, if you have a really good special operations forces in your country is just going to be a safer place and more of a force to be reckoned with, then I think it makes total sense to make sure that guys are physiologically capable of that, even if that means exogenous testosterone in reasonable doses prescribed by an actual doctor and taken in a reasonable way. So more to follow on that for sure, but really good question. Glad you brought it up. Haven't talked about that specific thing. I haven't talked about PEDs at all in a while. So good question. Next question, another one I've never talked about, I don't think. How to lose muscle for run performance. All right. So although this is not an issue for most people listening to this, it has been an issue and it will be issues for certain people in the future. What he's likely referring to is he's got so much muscle mass that it's restricting. He knows it's restricting his running ability and or making running just a more stressful endeavor on him, and he wants to get smaller. Now, the first thing I would recommend, if you're not that lean, I would go for body fat first. If you're anywhere over like 15% body fat, maybe even 13, 14% body fat, you can get down to probably at least 12, maybe even 10, depending on the person, before you start worrying about losing muscle. So I would definitely target fat loss first. But if you are lean, or once you get lean and you still have more muscle mass than you want, and you want to get better at endurance and therefore lose muscle, then it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just not lift nearly as much. I'm not recommending to never lift at all. That's probably not a good idea for anyone, but just kind of go in there and lift for maintenance. Go through the motions almost. Even though I wouldn't recommend this to most people, go in there and lift at like an RPE 6 or 7. Do enough volume to kind of maintain at the very most, but also not so much that you're growing. And also run a lot. If you do a ton of running and you just lift enough to barely maintain, maybe not even, maybe lose a little bit of strength and be okay with it, but you're still doing some lifting, you're still getting that stimulus for your body, and you're still, one of the other benefits of lifting is improved mobility and durability and just being a strong individual. So I would never recommend anyone just quit lifting, but you don't have to go in there and try to make gains. Additionally, nutritionally, eat in a calorie deficit. If you are in a deficit and you're not lifting hard and you're doing a ton of running, you're probably going to lose muscle eventually over time. Now, I would still eat enough protein. I would still eat enough overall micronutrients and eat healthy. But if you're in a deficit, if you're in a 300, 400, 500 calorie deficit and doing those other things physically, you'll likely lose muscle. Now, some people are just genetic freaks and they are just going to be jacked regardless. They're going to be super muscular regardless, whether they lift or not, whether they run or not. And if you are that type of person, which is very, very, very rare, it's not common at all. It's about as common as seeing someone who's over 7 feet tall. So not common. But if you are one of those rare breeds, then maybe stop lifting, at least for a little while. At least maybe your lower body. Maybe do some upper body calisthenics, whatever you have to maintain for your upcoming physical event that you're probably training for. But don't do a bunch of heavy squats. Don't do a bunch of heavy deadlifts. Don't do a bunch of heavy bench, a bunch of rows, a bunch of like heavy sets of 6 to 8 pull-ups or anything like that. And over time, you will start to drop some muscle mass. And also, because you're going to be running this entire time, you're also going to improve your running ability. So it's a win-win. It should be a slow process. You don't want to go about this quickly. You want to go about it very, very slowly and gradually. And again, start with fat loss first, where you're just focused on getting down to 12-ish% body fat, give or take. From there, that's when you can start focusing on more so the lean muscle loss. So lastly, I would be careful with this too. Although you may indeed be so muscular that it's limiting your running, that may not be the only thing. It may just be you haven't been training or running soundly. You haven't been following a sound running program. It may be that you are doing a ton of lifting, not much running. It may be lack of running ability, lack of running skill. It may be what you do outside the gym recovery-wise. it could be a bunch of other factors that are contributing. So going for fat loss at first, great idea. But before you just go straight from like losing fat, getting leaner to, okay, I need to lose muscle, make sure you've actually been giving yourself enough time to develop your running ability, and make sure that you have all those other blocks checked before you go straight to, I need to lose muscle, I need to lose lean mass. Next question. I have a 36-30 5-mile and a 225 12-mile ruck. Should I choose ruck or run on the RRL long aerobic days? Good question. So if you go back last episode, I discussed in detail ruck, run, lift. It's episode 178 if you want to check it out. But in this case, because you're pretty good, I would consider both of these numbers to be pretty damn solid. Not elite, not super top tier, not like top 10%, but pretty solid. I would either go back and forth, do 1 week where you do the run, 1 week where you do the ruck, or you could do more ruck run bricks. So in a couple of the weeks in the program, you'll see some ruck run bricks where it's a ruck followed by a run, intentionally programmed that way for guys prepping for selection, especially SFAS, like non-delta selection, where running and rucking are both necessary. You could either do more of those than is programmed. Maybe you could do every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, you do one of those instead of the ruck or the run. Or you just go back and forth between 1 week you do run, 1 week you do ruck. I would say that's probably the best way to approach it. There's other rucking in it. There's other running in it. So it's not like you're going to be on the weeks that you ruck instead of run. It's not like you're not running it all that week, and vice versa. So you're still going to get plenty of stimulus for both of those. And I would expect to make small improvements over time in each of those if you go about it that way. Next question, should I cut weight to make running gains and then slowly bulk, or continue running while bulking? So I'm assuming you want to get leaner first and better at running, and then you want to get more jacked, and you're wondering whether you should continue running once you start getting more jacked by bulking, eating in a surplus in the future. I think that's how the question is asked. I don't know. It's a little bit confusing, but I'm going to answer it that way. So you're in a cut, you're running, you're going to get leaner. Make sure you're lifting weights as well so you don't lose a bunch of muscle. Once you get to your desired body composition, when you start your bulk, should you keep running? If you want to continue to be good at running, then yes, you should absolutely keep running. I would say that's non-negotiable. If you don't really care about your running, you're just running right now, but like you really want to get jacked in the future, you can still run if you want, but I would say running is probably the least gains-friendly form of cardio that you can do, at least compared to other standard forms like cycling or riding an air bike or rower, Jacob's ladder, Stairmaster, pretty much anything else. Only because running beats you up more. It's more of a stressor. You get more muscle damage from running, and it's going to interfere a little bit more with your lifting and your gains. But you can absolutely still run on a bulk, no problem at all. And you'll just have to account for the extra calories that you're burning and eat those back and then some to make sure you're actually in a calorie surplus. So again, a little vague on the question, but I think that kind of answers it. It just really depends on whether you want to continue improving your running or not when you're in your bulk. Next question, is hitting the heavy bag fine for non-impact cardio days? Yeah, I would say, although it's impactful for like the upper body, make sure you're not like overdoing your upper body lifting plus doing a bunch of heavy bag work. You can get used to it over time if you do the heavy bag quite often, where it doesn't really damage you all that much. But if you're not super accustomed to it and you're doing a bunch of upper body stuff, and for your non-impact days, you do a bunch of hard, powerful, forceful, heavy bag work, then it might interfere a little bit with your upper body recovery. But it's definitely fine for lower body. I mean, you might be like jumping around like boxers do. Very, very minor, low off the ground, not all that much impact. It's mostly just like upper body impact, but like not necessarily bad impact, just bad if it's in the context of overdoing your upper body work and or you got bad shoulders, bad elbows, something like that, and you decide to do it. So I would say it's a great option. It can be a little bit difficult to maintain a steady zone 2 heart rate if you're doing like zone 2 aerobic base building work, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. So just kind of monitor those things and should be totally fine. Next question, just started the Q course. Congrats. Any advice? Oh, I got lots of advice on the Q course. I will link in the description of this episode an article I wrote that goes through, like, it's basically a deep dive for the Q course, tips, living situation, how to maximize your time there, how to make sure that you end up successful and end up getting your Green Beret and going to group, and so on and so forth. So check that article out. But general advice, take it a day at a time. Try not to think about, oh, I'm doing this in a month, I'm doing this in 3 months, I'm doing this in 6 months. Just take it a day at a time. Especially if you are a Delta and you're going to be in the Q course forever, the hardest part of that is the sheer duration. And if you're always thinking way too far down the road, it's just going to overwhelm the hell out of you. So a day at a time. Some situations you may have to take it like a meal at a time. If you're going through a very difficult or very grueling part of the Q course, SUT, SEER, things like that, just when you wake up, get to breakfast. Once breakfast is over, get to lunch. Once lunch is over, get to dinner. Once dinner's over, get to bedtime. If you're going to sleep that night. Not every night involves sleep in the Q course. Most nights do. But that would be probably my number one mindset advice. Keep your nose clean. If you're going to go out and party, nothing wrong with that, but make sure you have a responsible adult and make sure you are someone who can actually handle your booze and you make at least not terrible decisions when intoxicated, like driving, beating up your wife, getting in fights at bars, basic stuff like that. Don't do that. Additionally, keep yourself really freaking fit. Don't let your fitness slide. One of the big things that guys do in the Q course, and it blows my mind, is they feel like they've arrived and they just let their fitness slide. That is a massive mistake, regardless of what phase of the Q course you're in. Of course, your fitness is going to fluctuate quite significantly depending on which phase you're in, what you're doing. Like, you're not going to be super fit right after SEER. You're not going to be super fit right after Robin Sage. But you can regain that fitness pretty quickly, especially if you keep yourself at a solid level of fitness generally when you're able to, when you have the resources and the time and the availability to actually go and train and be consistent with it. Especially during language, the last thing you do in the Q course is 6 straight months of language. Lots and lots of guys let their fitness slide during language. Or they get on mystery PEDs and they get super jacked and they can't run and ruck anymore. So they're really jacked and maybe they look cool, but they can't perform. And the way you perform is definitely more important than the way you look. Looking jacked, yeah, it's fun, but if you're going to look jacked, make sure you can also run. Show up to group fit. Don't be that FNG that is also fat and out of shape. Academics, as far as passing the graded events, the academic portions, whether you are in MOS school, whether you're in SOCM, if you're a medic, I would suggest finding a time of day that works best for you, that your brain works best, and dedicating it to studying. It could be first thing in the morning when you get up. It could be at lunchtime. It could be after class. It could be in the evening. Just depends on what you kind of prefer. But if you do a little bit of studying every day, rather than just wait till the test is coming up and do a ton of studying right before the test, you're going to absorb more of the information and remember it and be able to use it in the future. And also, you're going to probably do better on the test, and you're going to be less stressed out, and you're not going to have to pull all-nighters and things like that. So that's what I recommend there. As far as graded events like SUT, especially if you're an 18 X-ray, I would highly recommend finding someone in your squad who has been to Ranger School. Ideally, you have more than one person in your squad who's been to Ranger School, and just basically latching onto them, being their little buddy that you ask questions to, and you get extra training from, and you run things by them, and they give you critiques and things like that. I learned probably 98% of what I learned in SUT, not from my instructor. My instructor didn't really teach as much. And that's not to say that every situation is going to be like that, but in my case, he didn't really teach that much. But I lucked out and had like 4 or 5 guys in my squad that had Ranger tabs, and they taught me most of the things I knew. And I give them lots of credit for me getting through SUT the first time as an 18 X-ray who knew absolutely nothing about small unit tactics. So those are some of the big wave tops, the big things I'd recommend. But again, I would check that article out and it'll get way more into the weeds. Next question is rhabdo, something the average person should fear due to volume with low weights? Not necessarily. I would not fear rhabdo if you're in decent shape and you don't just not drink water and you don't do anything crazy. You don't do these ridiculous training sessions. Then I wouldn't worry too much about rhabdo. Can you get rhabdo while you're getting smoked by cadre or something like that? Yeah, some guys do, but usually those guys are either not hydrated well, which is easy. You just hydrate more, or they are just not fit, which is easy. You just train accordingly so that you are fit and you don't get rhabdo when you do something a little bit out of the ordinary. As far as volume with low weights, I mean, I guess, yeah, you could get rhabdo that way if you just do like 1,000,000 lunges or 10,000 lunges or 10,000 push-ups or both or something like that. But it's not like if you do really high volume with low weights, which, you know, I don't know exactly why you would do a lot of that unless you're forced to. I don't really understand the training benefit of that, depending on what you're looking to do. Of course, if you're training for a competition that involves really low weight, lots of reps, that's one thing. But as far as like military fitness, not really all that necessary. Unless you're talking about like running, then of course that's low weight and lots of repetitions, but it's a little different. But if you are into that type of stuff, it's not like this well-known rhabdo culprit, if that makes sense. So that is my best stab at answering that question. I wouldn't worry too much about rhabdo if you're just doing the right things with training and outside training, and you're just prepared for the off chance that you might get smoked a little longer than usual. Next question. If I'm still building a base, can I do just the lifting portion of Gazelle 2.0 while I keep easy running? Yep, absolutely. You can do that. You can do lifting portion of Gazelle. You can do lifting portion of 2 and 5 mile. You could do Kickstart, basically any program other than Hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is a little bit high volume. Although if you're just doing some easy running and it's not crazy high volume, you probably could do Hypertrophy. You could pretty much do any of my programs. I mean, it wouldn't really make sense to do SFAS unless you're training for SFAS, but any of my programs would be great to add on to any of the lifting portions of my programs, minus the conditioning, if applicable, would be totally fine to add on to a bunch of easy running. Next question, 6 weeks left on SFAS Prep. Can I substitute Saturday's long ruck with land nav with a ruck? Yes, you can. However, the main goal for those Saturday sessions in this program, this is my program, by the way, is to improve your gait week time. So like your time trial, your 12 mile, your 8 mile, not that those are the exact distances that you'll go, but give or take, probably the short ruck is 6 to 8 miles. The longer ruck is probably 11 to 14 miles, give or take. I honestly don't know the distances of them, but that's the main goal with that Saturday ruck, because there's a bunch of running incorporated into it, ruck running. So if you are only doing land nav every weekend and skipping that speed ruck, then you're probably going to lack a little bit in the gait week department. Now, if you're already burning down hour 50, 12 milers, and you know you suck at land nav, even if you have to sacrifice 10 to 15 minutes off that 12 mile to get better at land nav, that's a good trade-off. So if that's the case, then yes. I would recommend either subbing the Tuesday ruck, which is a walking only heavier ruck with land nav, maybe not every week, but periodically, or maybe every other week or maybe every 3 weeks you do land nav instead of the speed ruck. So you sub that in every so often, not necessarily every single time. Honestly, you don't really need 6 consecutive weekends straight of land nav training in order to pass the STAR course. You're going to get plenty of instruction on the front end. Believe me, it's a great idea to get some land nav training in before you go and feel really comfortable and confident with it. But do you need 6 weekends in a row in place of your speed rucks? Most people don't. So I would probably get 2 weekends before you go of land nav training. So maybe you have 6 weeks left. You do land nav this weekend, you do the speed rucks the next 2, then you do another land nav session, then you do the speed rucks and then taper, or something like that. That would probably be a solid idea. But if you can get to where you can do it on Tuesday, I know this may not work for a lot of people's schedule because of work and things like that, but if you can do it on Tuesday and still stick to that speed ruck on the weekend, even better. But either of those are fine ways to go about it. Next question, what has had the biggest impact on run times for struggling runners that you've coached? This is a good question. I haven't really thought of it, but I would say properly going about building your running base, as well as making any necessary body composition changes, as well as actually treating running like a skill and practicing it and thinking about your cadence, thinking about the way your feet hit the ground, not just going out and running till you get tired. A lot of people will expedite or completely skip the base building phase, which takes a while and it's boring, but it's really, really important. And they'll go into speed work way too early, and they'll do speed work all the time. They'll do speed and tempo every week, speed and tempo every week, no weeks off, no down weeks, no weeks where you don't do speed or tempo. And it just beats them up. And also because they don't have the foundation, the overall aerobic base, They may be able to put together a fast 2 mile or 1 mile or 800 or something like that. Or maybe they can put a fast 5 mile up one day. But what about the next day and the next day? What about rucking? What about the other distance runs? Generally speaking, if you don't have that good solid foundation of aerobic ability, you're going to really struggle when you have to repeat your performance, or you have to go a little bit longer than maybe what you're used to. Or sometimes, for a lot of guys, especially bigger guys, they may not even be able to meet standards on a 2 mile or a 5 mile. And that's a problem. And it all kind of stems back to lack of a good, strong foundation. So build a really good base. If you need more info on that, check out episode 95. It's only on audio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That'll give you a really good foundation of what to know about base building. It's not quite as up to date as my base building recommendations would be, but it's still a really good start, a far better base building plan than most people implement. 2, if you have weight to lose, especially fat, get leaner. 3, remember that running is a skill, and it's not just something that you should go out and do as hard as you can and go out and run a tempo run at a 145 cadence and just hope for the best, hope you don't get injured, hope you're really good at running. Those 3 things right there are probably most of the equation for being a good runner, whether you struggle with running or not. Some people, of course, are just natural runners and they don't really need all that much meticulousness, but if you are naturally just not great at running, which is fine and very common, then don't skip those. Don't sleep on those things. And be patient. Give it time. Eventually, you're going to get better at running if you do it properly. And a lot of people also just aren't patient enough. They think that they're supposed to make these ridiculous run gains every single week, or they're supposed to cut a minute off their 2 mile time every month or something like that, which you could do if you suck at running and you follow like the 2 and 5 mile program. Guys have cut off way more than that off their 2 mile as well as their 5 mile. Shameless plug, link in bio. But just be patient. It takes time. And if you are just not naturally good at it, it takes even more time. Next question, we will do 2 more. Best recovery method. So the top 4 recovery methods are probably in order, but I'll kind of get into why they're in order. But number 1, training load management. So you are making sure that you're training with the right amount of volume, intensity, you're executing movements properly, you're resting when you need to rest, you're training when you need to train, you're going hard when you're supposed to go hard, you're going easy when you're supposed to go easy, you're going moderate when you're supposed to go moderate, and so on and so forth. That is hands down number 1, because no matter what you do, no matter how good you are with the next 3 things I'll talk about, certain training loads just can't be recovered from. They're just going to be excessive. And this is not a big deal. This is not really a concern for most people, but it is a concern for most people watching or listening to this, because type A individuals, guys who are hard chargers and super driven go-getters who have experienced success from really, really hard work and really, really grueling work in non-fitness related subjects in the past, guys just tend to do way too much. I see it all the time. Almost every single client that has started work with me, I had to cut their volume back, and they're making better progress and better gains than they were when they were doing way more, because your body can only handle so much. So that's by far number 1. From there, it is sleeping really, really well. I put sleep before the next one, nutrition, because when you sleep really well and your sleep is sufficient duration as well as high quality, it makes sticking to your nutrition way, way, way easier. When you don't sleep well, you have cravings, your hunger-related hormones are all out of whack, and it's really difficult to eat properly and make the right food choices, eat the right amount of food, eat the right amount of macros, digestion, all those things. So sleep, then it's nutrition. Make sure you're eating enough calories. The best way to recover, depending on what your goals are, but generally speaking, is to eat around maintenance, maybe for some people in a slight surplus. Being in a deficit is not the end of the world if you have fat to lose. But a calorie deficit is also a recovery deficit. A big calorie deficit is a massive recovery deficit, massive stressor, not a good idea. A minor calorie deficit, if that applies to you, fine. Just note that you're going to be at a slight recovery deficit if you are not eating as many calories as you're expending. Then it's the right macros. So a lot of people think that if they just eat more protein, they're going to recover better. Once you hit about a gram per pound of body weight, give or take, more protein is not going to result in more muscle mass, nor is it going to result in better recovery. From there, you want to start considering carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a massive recovery tool that is often overlooked. People think carbs and performance. People who are not into fitness think carbs make you fat. Neither of those are true. Carbs are massive for recovery, getting your glycogen stores replenished. Huge. Also, eating carbohydrates will put you in a more parasympathetic or rest and digest state. People in low carb diets, most people, not everyone, but people on low carb diets in general, especially when they do it for too long and or they do it in combination with really intense exercise and or a really high stress life, are just always in this sympathetically driven state, fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight, you're not recovering. It's okay to be in fight or flight certain times of the day if you're training hard or waking up in the morning and you want to get going, or if you're getting chased by a dog on a running trail, a stray dog, then yeah, you want your body's fight or flight to kind of kick in and get you through it. But other than that, you want to be in a parasympathetic or rest and digest state. That's when the recovery happens. So that's another added benefit of eating carbs. And in that same kind of category is number 4, manage your stress. Again, most people, especially people listening to this, especially type A individuals, are super duper stressed out all the time, whether you feel it or not. You're just the type of person that kind of digs cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that kind of makes you feel good. I call it an override hormone because even when you are super stressed or really tired, your cortisol levels will go up and you'll feel pretty good. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing though, unless of course it's one of those situations I was talking about earlier. When you're sympathetic all day because you don't really manage your stress and or you don't sleep well and or you don't eat well and or you don't manage your training load, that's kind of like why this is number 4, then kind of starts this whole cycle of not recovering, not feeling good, not being able to like think clearly and focus, mood swings, appetite issues. You're stressed so you can't sleep and then you don't sleep well, so you're more stressed the next day and so on and so forth. So whether you prefer going for walks in nature, or maybe you journal, or you do some breath work, you do some meditation or yoga nidra, whether you like to sit on the couch and watch comedy and just laugh, or hang out with funny people, or hang out with people who make you feel good and make you feel like yourself, any of those can work. But because they're practices, a practice is something you do consistently, whether you feel stressed or not. So to get good at something, you have to do it on a repetitive basis. So if you only use your stress management technique like meditation or something like that, when you're feeling crazy overwhelmed, you're just not going to be as good at it as you would be if you practice it on a regular basis. So it's going to be a hell of a lot more effective that way. So choose something that kind of suits your eye and that you feel like you can stick to. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. For me, I generally just walk a couple times a day outside without my phone in nature. And that's a great way to kind of de-stress and reset and feel better afterwards. I've never come back from a walk in nature and felt worse. I always feel better mentally and physically. And I also do yoga nidra a few days per week. If you want a great yoga nidra, another word for this is NSDR. Huberman talks about this all the time on his podcast, but if you want a good resource for that, go on YouTube and type in Ali Boothroyd. She has a great YouTube channel for this. She drops, I think, a video every day. You can do a 10-minute session. You can do a 25-minute session. You can do a 50-minute session. She has like hour-plus long sessions. I usually do anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes. And it basically like kind of calms you down, resets your nervous system. When I finish it, I feel a lot less stressed out. I feel less overwhelmed. And I feel a lot more clear and focused and able to go about the rest of my day. So those are the top 4. I did not mention a single time ice baths or sauna or foam rolling or stretching because those things don't do almost anything compared to the 4 things that I just recommended, even though those are the lower effort, the more gimmicky and the more flashy recovery methods. But I don't care who you are. If you're not nailing those 4 things, no amount of foam rolling or ice bathing or saunaing is really going to do all that much. So those are options, but they're definitely not the first options. They are the sprinkles on the cake. There's icing, there's cake, and then on top of the icing are the sprinkles. And you can have a great cake with no sprinkles. You can't have a great cake with no cake or with no frosting. Usually. I mean, I guess you could probably have a good cake without frosting, but you get the analogy. So definitely focus on the big things before you focus on the little nitty gritty things, because it's going to make a massive difference. And most people, everything I just went over, most people have some work that they could do in all or most of those categories, including myself. So just consider that. Next question. Is there anything you've said on the pod that you've changed your views on? Yes, lots of things. I would say that if you are taking advice from someone and they're a thought leader or professional in a certain field, and they never change their mind on things, or they never change their stance or point of view on a certain subject ever over years, then I would take whatever they say with a grain of salt, because they're probably really biased and they're probably just so bought into their BS and so drunk on their Kool-Aid that they are probably not the right person to listen to. People who are more open to learning new things and more open to different points of view and more open to, hey, I messed that up and changed my mind or partially changed my mind, are a lot more, I just feel like those people have more integrity and they're better people to listen to. Everyone that I get information from that I trust, I have heard or seen them change their mind or change their stance on something in the past at some point. So that's just a general recommendation. But a couple of big things. I'll just go one thing on nutrition, one thing on lifestyle, and one thing on fitness. So like I said earlier on the base building question, when I made my base building episode, I did not discuss touching on speed at all. I didn't discuss doing strides. I didn't discuss doing hill sprints. I didn't discuss doing pickups. I only talked about slow running, because I had not really opened myself up to the world of proper full-on base building. I covered about 98% of what I would consider a good solid base building protocol in that episode, but I didn't talk about touching on speed, which is a super important part of a base build. And I will talk about that in my future episode. As far as lifestyle, I used to be like really gung-ho about you need to get a certain amount of sleep every night or most nights in order to train hard and continue to get after it. And although getting a certain amount of sleep and a sufficient amount of sleep and high enough quality sleep is going to make your training progress and your training experience a lot more fruitful, that doesn't mean that if you are in a situation where you just can't, like your job requires it, or you have a new baby at home or something like that, and you can't get optimized sleep, that doesn't mean you can't train hard. And it doesn't mean that you should like put your training on hold until you get your sleep better and then get back to training. That's not necessarily what I used to think. And I haven't said that before, but I used to say all the time, if you're not sleeping well, but you are training hard, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And I don't think that's fully true. I know that's not fully true, because plenty of people make gains and make progress and are super fit despite the fact that they don't sleep well, whether it's their fault or whether they have obligations that restrict them from getting sufficient sleep. So although you should definitely adjust your training and dial it back a little bit if you're in a period of your life where you're not sleeping all that well, that doesn't mean you should just really, really take it easy and not do much and you can never train hard. So that's a lifestyle thing. As far as nutrition, this isn't really something I've changed my mind on necessarily. I've always thought carbohydrates were important, that you should eat a lot of them, but I never really emphasized carbohydrates until somewhat recently. Pretty much when I started like my ultra prep, I got really, really into the research and did like kind of an obsessive deep dive on carbohydrates and how beneficial they are for not just endurance, but especially endurance, but also just in general. If you're training, if you're lifting a lot, running a lot, doing both, and you're eating kind of not enough carbohydrates, or you think you're eating enough carbohydrates, a lot of people are like, yeah, I eat plenty of carbs, but they don't actually eat the optimal or anywhere near the optimal amount of carbohydrates to recover well. So now I am very, very emphatic when I talk about carbohydrates. If you guys have been listening for the last probably, 30, 40 episodes, you probably heard me talk about carbs till I'm blue in the face. But again, didn't really change my mind on it, but I just emphasize it a hell of a lot more. So that's the nutrition category. I have also changed my mind on lots of other things, so keep that in mind. But those are some of the examples that came to the top of my head as I went through. So that's it, guys. Last question. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you got something good out of this episode. Hope everyone has an awesome weekend. And until next time, Terminator out.